Now we get to their Nomad review. And I was really hoping that they were going to right the ship or at least try to give a fair review. And to be fair to them, some of the points they make are fair. Some of the things they say are complimentary to the device. But they start off by saying with sarcasm, the Supernote, quote, finally released a hardware. They should really be focused on software. Now, remember that they earlier said that they don't make good software. So again, make up my mind. They released hardware. They're not just focusing on software anymore. But okay, but they don't make good software. So do they or don't they? They mention Kindle again, and this time they actually do show Kindle, which I think is nice that they actually give it its due and they show a little bit. And they compliment the Supernote for expanding outside of just being an e-note. This is an interesting quote to me. Are talking about users and they say that you buy the Supernote and this is a good iteration for, quote, note-taking prowess that comes with the territory of owning a renowned Supernote. They're not saying that it's renowned any other time. But here, all of a sudden, it is. They talk about the packaging. They like that, and I think that they were complimentary of that. They like the little touches and kind of the sayings the Supernote includes, which I think is pretty universal. Most people like that approach. They talk about the inclusion of the screwdriver, and they talk about that it says "I'm not a pin," so that you know it's a screwdriver, which you can see, but it's fun. Um, And they say they're one of the only ones in the industry, one of the only note-taking devices in the industry that don't give you a pen. Now, that's technically true, but when you go to buy a Supernote, whether it's a Nomad or in the future the A5X2 or previously the A5X, you do get to choose your pen as you're building your package, and it defaults to having a stylus. If you choose not to, that's fine. Remarkable didn't always include the pen. Styli are very personal to a lot of people. Some people really enjoy specific pen feels and specific types, but they do give you a decent price point. You can get the standard clickable pen. I think it's right now for around $50. And so you add that to the device, which is the crystal edition they've got all in, you'd be looking at around $439, I think. The point being that that's what they had. They didn't have a pen, so they said there's no pen or tips, which I thought was interesting because it's a ceramic pen, so why would you need tips? They again say there's no audio in the device. Completely false. You can say no speakers, no onboard speakers. Yes. They say it's underachieving hardware. They do compliment it for being lightweight. They go back to and they turn around and they show the back and they got the crystal edition so you can see the inside and they show you the screws and the screwdriver and they say they don't recommend you should do this yourself, but you could replace all of these components. But yet they give you the screwdriver, so that doesn't seem like a wise move because of varying skill sets. They obviously missed all of the marketing material. Again, for the last 7 months, almost eight, they haven't watched any reviews by any other reviewers, obviously, because maybe we all don't exist. But here they are kind of saying that, they give you the screwdriver almost as a malpractice piece. Then they talk about the translucent back on the Nomad, and they say it looks very cheap and it feels, quote, like dollar store backing. I am holding one right here, and I think it's beautiful. Now, functionally, I think that the white background, which they don't even mention, but the white background is probably the more functional. of the two, but this is beautiful, and it highlights the fact that these are meant to be replaceable, and the reason that design choice was made. Good e-reader acts like that's the complete. You know, they don't even mention it, that this idea of right to repair and the laws that are changing. They don't even mention any of that. They don't even talk when they're talking about the sliders about undo or redo, which is kind of a basic function of the sliders. They just kind of gloss over. They say the Supernote platforms always had the slider. They're right that it's always had the right hand slider, but not the right and left. They don't talk in any way about the functionality of that. Again, this is where they go into this diatribe and they say, quote, this is a note-taking unit, first, foremost, and only. It doesn't do anything else. Completely false. Now, you can say that it excels in note-taking, which I would agree with, and other things are not as high of a priority. And I think that Kit and Halid made a very good point during the end of the E-Ink Euros that talking about, this is a note taker at the highest level. But, some of the other things, reading and different components, it's not quite as excellent as maybe some other devices are. You can make that argument. But to say this device doesn't do anything else when they've spent time talking about Dropbox, talking about Kindle, talking about email integration and other videos, it does so much more. Now they go on to make this crazy, they shake a cup of pens around and they say they have to go to the good e-reader, quote, coffee cup of pens and make sure it works. Misleading, disingenuous, ridiculous. It's a whack-em device. Any of these pens are going to work. We know that out of the gate. It's not going to not work. But they have this whole huge cup of styli. Why don't they have any of the Supernote pens, which they've said in other videos are the best in class? They didn't bother to keep any of them, except for the Lamy collaboration that was customized that Supernote gave them, which doesn't have the ceramic tip. And that's what they used for the review on the Nomad. So I think that's just a little bit of a weird part of the review. Again, they talk about templates, they talk about the swipe gestures, some of it at least. They talk about reorganizing pages, and this is where they actually get into some really interesting observations, but most of which has been covered by other reviewers at this point. They talk about the Lammy and how it feels on the new film, but they don't mention that they've changed the film. They just say that it's a sticky rubber film. I don't even know if they know the difference between Wheelwright 1 and 2. And to be fair, there is variability, and some people, I know Voya has been very, vocal about not enjoying the Wheelwright 2 as much as the Wheelwright 1. And I think that's, again, a valid critique. But they say it feels like this Staedtler digital jumbo. They say that they assume it would be better with the ceramic, which it is. And they do admit at this point that they're being subjective. But then they go on this crazy thing where if they had watched any other reviews or, even any communications from Supernote themselves about the fact that the film may be sticky and may need to be broken in, they would understand and be able to communicate in this review that that's a potential issue. So what they do to make their point is they push on the screen and kind of pull the device all over the table and say it's so sticky it's almost unusable because of how hard you have to press down. And they go through and talk about how they have to be nitpicky because otherwise they're not really doing a service for anyone and they have to point out all the shortcomings. Again, be fair, be honest, but don't just criticize to criticize. And then they start looking at the kind of the pressure sensitivity and the thinnest, the point oh 0.01 pencil style, which is really cool. And, they start showing the latency is really good, but then they start saying it keeps cutting out on them. And they have to push so hard that it makes it unusable almost. And again, they're not exactly using the best nib for it, although the Lamy does work. But secondly, they've had this device open. Of course, we don't know exactly how long they edited or how much time they spent with the device, but not a long time because they did the opening, unboxing, and review all at once, which means they probably didn't spend even a day with the device actually writing on it in any substantive way where the stickiness would have gone away or at least reduced. Here's another thing that's interesting. They say that they appreciate the cloud services. So now remember, earlier in this review, this doesn't do anything but note taking. That's all it does, according to them. You can't do anything else on it, but they appreciate cloud services. And they talk about Bluetooth. Again, they don't talk about audio here. They don't mention that you can pair this and use it as an audio device to listen to ebooks, to have apps read to you. They talk about no load shutdown, which is kind of cool. They do highlight that. But then they talk about apps, and they say there are only two, and they are right. There are two pre-installed, which are the Atelier app and the Kindle. They say you cannot sideload apps, which is untrue. Sideloading is available, can be enabled, has been for a while. You can say that you don't want to go through the process to sideload apps the way that they suggest you do, but you can't say it's not possible. You're not jailbreaking the device. You're not having to hack the device to do it. You're just telling the device through an authorized toggle that you want to be allowed to install APK files through this method. And then they don't even show you the Atelier app at all. They do complement Supernote support, which I think is really important. Um, and they say you aren't going to be alone if you purchase the product, that you will be supported. And I think that was really good. They go back to this idea that this is and always has been a one-trick pony. It only does one thing. They start to talk about overall it struggles in speed everywhere. It's a very slow device. Um, and then they go through this exercise, which is interesting to me, about how far away the screen is, the eating screen is from the writing field. Now remember, they've said two contradictory things here. They've said super low latency, and they've said that the film is almost making it unwritable. So here they try to marry those two things. They try to say, okay, the reason that it is being screened so far away is because of this rubber sticky layer, which is Feel Right 2. They don't even call it by its name. And it's a Wacom technology. It's not a proprietary Supernote thing. That pushes it away. And they show you the shadow. Any of you who have used it know that it's not as big of a deal as they're making it out to be. But again, subjective. They have their own opinion. That's fine. But they keep going back to this. And then they end with this, quote, it was a nice attempt to battle with the bosses. So kind of coming back around to say that, you know what, they tried, but they really didn't hit the mark. They inaccurately claim that there's no audio again. Again, if you want to say no speakers, go ahead, but please be clear. They talk about no sideloading of apps. Completely inaccurate. You can sideload the apps on this device, which they would know if they had watched even one review or read anything on Supernote's website. They say the screen is grippy. Again, subjective, and they have a right to that opinion. Unfathomably slow, saying it's just so ridiculously slow. No pin at the time of purchase. Then they say it's a genius build, one of the best they've ever seen, but incredibly cheap. Now, mind you, earlier they said only the backing was cheap, but the rest of the build was very good. So again, make up my mind. I don't know what you believe here. And this is what I thought was really interesting. So they've been criticizing the software multiple times in other videos, even in this video. Now, mind you, they haven't shown much of the software. They've shown the note-taking experience. They've shown a little bit about being able to read on a PDF, but they haven't, and they've showed the note-taking app a little bit. But they didn't show Atelier at all. They end with this quote. Like, it almost sounds like they should stick to software instead of making new hardware. So basically, by the end of this, after going through this device that enhances everything that they said 3 years ago was not cookie cutter, was innovative, was interesting, now they say, not so great. And okay, again, you have a right to your opinion, but you need to be consistent. And I think one thing that most of the reviewers that I follow on a very consistent basis, at least they're consistent. And that's what doesn't happen here. And if you're going to ignore even the most basic functions of a device, how can you call it a review? That's my question. In this last little section, we're going to talk about, and I'm going to show some of the biggest things that had they done any research at all, and they're supposed to be one of the larger reviewers out there, and they've been trusted for years. They have a huge following, but some of the biggest things that they decided to not even talk about. And quite frankly, I don't even know if they know about. Did they do even the latest software update, or did they just take it straight out of the box and not bother to check anything?